Hello and welcome to the Claret and Blue podcast. Today is our weekly Q&A episode. I'm your host for it, Dan Rolinson, joined by Matthew Kendrick. Matthew, how's things?
Why'd you call me Matthew?
Don't know.
I feel like I'm in trouble before we started, but I'm very well, thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, I've opted for those listening, another Villa training top that I found out from the wardrobe. It's I think it's 2010 or 2011, the FX Pro Nike training top. But I'm kind of blending into the background a little bit, aren't I? I didn't really think about this until I put it on.
You're just like a floating head, like the hologram in Red Dwarf. That's what you are. But is that FX? Has it got the sponsor? They don't have sponsors on. See, I would have had that without you saying me that, without seeing the sponsor. I would have had that down for a year later. McLeish relegation.
That was Macron, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. But I seem to recall something similar. Anyway, let's crack on.
What we're actually here for is to answer your questions. Not loads to get through today. It's international break. Everyone's feeling a little bit moody and miserable, aren't they, I suppose? Before we get into those, Matt, though, I did the post-match show with Matt Lynch on Saturday evening after Villa lost Anfield. What did you make of the game?
I think we'd all got ourselves into such a flap before the game that initially anything less than a 6-0 drubbing was going to be, the most we could hope for. I actually played, I don't know whether this will fly in the face of the common view. I actually thought generally we played quite well, so much so that when the second goal went in, another kind of quick, rapid counter-attack, it really knocked the stuffing out of me because I thought we might just create another chance and sneak a point. So I thought we did okay. And given the performance before, probably two of the performances before, certainly Tottenham second half, and then a flat performance pretty much throughout the game in Bruges, I was heartened by the performance. Now, I don't want to clutch for straws because we know that we're in a concerning run of form, but I was a little bit put out, I think, by some of the doom and gloom on the back of the Liverpool game because they're flying at the moment, and we were able to take a chunk of that game away from them in the way that many other opponents haven't done this season. So, as much as it's a frustrating spell for us at the moment, I do think we've got to stay realistic. And so, yeah, it was frustrating. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into the Liverpool game. Obviously, the obvious moments, our penalty shouts and our complete dereliction of duty, defending from our own corners. Those are obviously the big issues. And I think that's probably what frustrated me more than ever. That first goal, I thought it was a fairly kind of nip and tuck game. Up until then, we've just gifted them that just by being naive. And then once you've done that, chances that come your way, albeit a couple of brilliant saves from their goalie, you've got to stick your chances away. And I think the Morgan Rogers chance at the start of the second half was probably the one that's done for us, really. Is the international break at a good time or a bad time? And that kind of age-old question, and me saying I don't like nonsense like that. But I've answered it anyway. I'm asking it myself today, and I think it is a good time now because we've obviously got another injury, and it gives Emery the chance to just, with the players that are still knocking around, gives the chance to say, listen, let's just remember what got us here in the first place, and let's just start doing the basics again. So, long-winded answer. Liverpool result really, really annoyed me. The performance not so much because I think there were good bits in it. But probably our set piece coach needs to work on what we're doing by stopping people scoring from our own corners.
I know that is bad, isn't it? And we said on that post-match show the standards aren't particularly high, and we got a little bit of heat of like, oh, is this the best we can do now? Like not getting battered at Anfield, that's the standard, and it's not. But the standards aren't great at the moment, and that Liverpool game was the best game we'd played that week. The second half of Spurs was abject. Club Bruges was pretty rubbish throughout anyway, and we lose that game because Tyrone Mings does what he does. I'm kind of writing off Crystal Palace as the club seemed to anyway. So that week, that Liverpool game was our brightest performance, and it wasn't particularly brilliant, but it was signs of, there's something still there. And if you take the chances, it's potentially a different game, obviously. But yeah, we've spoken about that a little bit. And like you, I came away from it thinking, I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't quite just rally ourselves just a little bit there and sneak something. Like me and John predicted 1-1 on the preview, kind of like a head over heart kind of thing. No, heart over head kind of thing of like, oh, is that the best we can hold on to? But it could have been a 1-1 game if you if you don't get the sucker punch from Salah and you take one of our chances. It is different. So I wasn't on board with the kind of over dramatic. Oh well, that's it then. We're going to finish in the bottom half now and all this kind of stuff. There's still a hell of a long way to go. Should we get into the questions, or are you about to Google something because you want to discuss something else?
I was gonna. I mean, is that obvious? I tried to be discreet, but I've got my microphone set up so I don't want to knacker up the technical side of things that I'm tapping away like a little dormouse. I was just familiarising myself with the Premier League table, basically how concertinaed it is between third and all the way down. Probably Tottenham in 10th, 16, between 19 and 16 points.
I think it's 4 points between Man United and third, which is Man United are 13th. So it's very, very, very tight. And 2 weeks' time, or well, I suppose we don't play for 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks' time when we come back and there's another round of fixtures or two, that top half could again look very different just by the basis of a couple of results. So this is why I can't get on board with, we're 10th at the moment. Oh, no, we're going to finish mid-table. We beat Crystal Palace, we'll probably be in the top 4 again. And then we're going to flip-flop so quickly.
I think the thing with me, and I kind of paint myself as the resident miserable old man, and my face kind of typecast me in that role as well, but I do try to see the bigger picture when we can. And I think, listen, people who have really had enough and are really at the kind of depths of despair will probably think I'm just making excuses here. But if we were starting the season in 2 weeks' time and you forgot everything that had gone before it in the Premier League, and we're on the level points with 6 or 7 of our rivals, who would you think has got the better squad, has got the better coach, has got the know-how? You'd back us, wouldn't you? If it was a standing start from everybody as of whenever football resumes, in 2 weeks' time, you'd think, we're going to, look at us there. We've got a great chance of top 6, even top 4 if the wind blows in the right direction. Now, I know our judgment's going to be coloured by the fact that we've seen a mini blip, but in my mind, that's still what it is. It still is a mini blip. Still won 3 games out of 4 in the Champions League. I wouldn't. I was playing 5-a-side with me mates last night, and one of them said, we were talking about Emery, and he kind of saying, people saying he's under pressure, and I said, well, everyone's saying the same about Guardiola at the moment. Maybe we should have a manager swap, and I'm like, absolutely no chance. I would have this manager that we've got over anybody in the Premier League, and a couple of ropey performances and dodgy results isn't gonna change my mind with that, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, let's move on to the questions then. Like I said, we haven't got loads because it's international break, and we're just in this moment at this period where things we probably spoke about on the last Q&A still apply, but we have at least got a different voice on this episode. We'll start with Zach, who said, how many times have we caught opponents offside per game this year versus last? It seems like we don't play nearly as high of a line, or are we playing opponents onside more? Maybe a bit of both. Your thoughts? Now, I've gone away and done the digging via John Townley, who's done the digging for me, basically. So fair play, John. Thank you for listening. As an average, we were at 4.39 offsides per game last season. And obviously a smaller sample size this, but so far we're only at 2.1 per game. 167 total offsides last year, which was topped by some distance. I think Spurs were behind us again and kind of notorious for playing a high liner, and they were on something like 120. This season, it's just 24 offsides. That still puts us 4th, but it's certainly a drop off of, what is it, half, isn't it? 4 point something to 2 point something per game. Now, I don't necessarily know where we go with this stat or with this conversation, but I suppose it's a little bit about Villa's style of play, that it's been recognisable from the eye test that we're not playing as high of a line. We're not catching people offside with an offside trap as often. Has that got any bearing on the results and the performances not being as good this year?
It's probably easier on the blood pressure when you're not, you're not relying on the linesman 15 minutes after the offence has taken place to finally let you know that your eyeballs were correct. I'm not sure, to be honest. I genuinely am not sure what difference that has made. I think on a wider perspective, our defending hasn't been good enough. With my flaky brain and trying to think, I don't know how many goals have come, through the centre of the pitch like that. I mean, you probably know better than me, and I've probably been completely and utter nonsense now, but the goals that we've conceded seem to me, I mean, I'm just looking at the Tottenham ones the other day where I think we've looked too vulnerable down the flanks. And I think we've got a question about the fullbacks coming later, so that maybe we'll sort that then. But I don't know. I think it's two things, isn't it? Is the way we set up now, does that make us more vulnerable defensively? But also, if we haven't got as high line, are we pressing as relentlessly? Are we being able to almost suffocate teams in their own half relentlessly? I don't think we are in that sense. There was talk. I think there was talk post-match against Liverpool. Some of the punditry, I think it was McManaman and Alan Hutton that I watched. And Liverpool, was it even? I think it might have been Arne Slot when they're interviewing him saying we expected Villa to be more aggressive. Now, listen, maybe that's Emery trying to be shrewd, thinking, well, if you do
that, get battered 5-0.
If you press too hard and they still find a way through, they'll kill you, kind of thing. But I think the fact that we haven't played a high line, in my mind, has probably affected us more in terms of the dominance that we can put on games than it kind of leaving. Do you know what I mean? Than it making us more susceptible, to attacks from the opposition.
You're right to kind of flag up the goals conceded from wide positions. That's a problem, most notably on the right-hand side, I would suggest, without looking at any of the specific stats. It feels like most of the dangerous chances we concede come down that side. It's an area that opposition know we're vulnerable at, so of course they're going to try and exploit that. And also what we spoke about after the Bruges game as well, it seems that every goal we concede feels like a stupid error that we've done as well. And that's nothing to do with playing a high line or not, or having problems in the way we set up to play the game, but individual moments of lapses of concentration or poor quality of playing out from the back or whatever it might be. And you combine those things, I don't think that we're not as good this year because we're not playing a high line, or that we are, but we're not as good at it. It's that we're weaker in other areas, and when we do have to come to defend, we don't challenge for the ball in the air well enough, or we look too easy to play against, or we just pass it straight to them and say, go on then, just play from there if you want. And that's been our downfall so far this season. And all this is coupled with the fact that, as you said, we're not bad. We're not in the relegation zone. We're not like in trouble. This isn't Villa like being really poor. We're as good as the rest of the top half at the moment. Liverpool are running away with it, 5 points clear at the top. Man City are still a little bit ahead as well, despite their recent run of form. But beyond that, from Arsenal all the way down to Man United, who could be a different beast under their new manager, anyone in that little cluster of teams now, including like a Brentford, Bournemouth, Brighton, can beat anybody. And Villa are level with all of those sides. And you'd like to think over the course of the season, Villa's coach and squad are better than those smaller clubs. That's so disrespectful. But the kind of cream rises to the top. And at the moment, everyone is kind of battling with each other. But hopefully come the end of the season, we can oust a Brentford or Brighton, etc.
We're so far ahead of schedule. And I think it's almost, not brainwashed us, but it's almost thought. And it's when you see the ticket prices go up to a ridiculous level. Yes, Matt's on about that again. I don't want to speak to myself in the first person. When you see the ticket prices, when you see the discussion of why we didn't go even stronger in the League Cup, all these kind of things we want. And again, we've spoken, Dan, haven't we, about previous ones about how does a big club behave and all this kind of stuff. And I think because of that, the expectation is that we shouldn't ever drop a single point at Villa Park. We shouldn't ever lose a single football match. Now, we're going to. The best teams do. The very, very best teams do. So over the course of the season, that will happen. I just think it's so new to us under Emery. One of my favourite things has been, well, Emery doesn't let a crisis set in. How often do we lose more than one or two games in a row? It's happened. So, let's see how we respond now, because football and sport and life, Christ, I'm sounding like a fridge magnet here, but they're not all about when things are going well. They're what you do when things are challenging you, what you do in the face of adversity. And I think this is the test of Emery as a leader. This is the test of the squad and how we've developed. So, and this sounds really sentimental, whatever. It's the test of us as supporters as well, because that's what we are. We're supporters. So let's just see back the people who have got us into this situation. And I mean the situation of being a Champions League club, beating Bayern Munich, finished fourth, not this situation of losing 4 games in a row. Let's just see what they've got next and see what we can do to support what they've got next.
Christ, how big's your fridge?
My fridge?
It's the biggest fridge magnet ever, no?
Oh, I thought he was on about over my shoulder, and that's a cupboard of cleaning products, by the way, not a fridge. Yes, it was a rather long speech, wasn't it? That
and this is the if buts and maybes coming back out again. If Villa didn't qualify for the Conference League in Emery's first season, and he got us from 17th to 10th, and that was an improvement, and we looked good, but we didn't quite make it. And last year we finished in the Conference League or even the Europa League. This year we wouldn't be looking at where Villa are at the moment, going, oh no, this isn't as good as what we've been used to. And obviously that comes with kind of the cause and effect that, well, we did do it last year, so there has been a drop off. But you're right in terms of like the longer term expectation. I think people probably thought this year was the year that we might challenge for the top 4, not that we have to do it. As I've said before, I'm not going to get too flip-floppy in terms of like, oh no, we've lost bad, really, really bad. Oh, we've won. Oh, we're going to win the league. I'd like to see where we are after game week 25, 30. And if we're 10th then and we're not going to make it into Europe, different conversation. When we've played 10 or 11 games and we're not in the European places, doesn't matter. You could put a run together and finish up there in the last 2 or 3 weeks of a season. Should we do the next question?
I don't know. I didn't know whether that was that a question for me. No, was it just a?
No, it's just a. Yeah, it just nod. Just
yeah,
nod
it's a marathon, not a sprint. Basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly that. Just say great point, mate, and we'll move on.
Great point.
Thanks, mate. From Nadia next. She says, when do we admit we got the summer window badly wrong? We spent a lot of money, so PSR can't be an excuse. Should we have spent 50 million on Onana if money was tight? I'll let you take that first. I'm not going to say anything.
I don't know. I mean, I think Onana's done a good job. We got a problem where we had to move on Douglas Luiz for PSR reasons, which I think there's another question about him as well, so I won't go too deep to that either yet. Badly wrong is a bit harsh. I think badly wrong to me is on the scale of how many games in are we now? We played about
11, I think.
11 games in. If we hadn't won in any of them, or we're really struggling, I think you could say badly wrong. We probably thought that we needed to strengthen in the right back area. I don't think it is fair to say that we got it badly wrong. To be honest, I think it's too soon to say that. I'm not even sure that the struggles that we're going through at the moment is really a personnel thing, because I back the talent in that squad. I back the mentality in the squad. I back the fact that Emery, better than pretty much anyone I'd imagine, knows how to set them up to be competitive, to win football matches. I just think, and this sounds like a massive cop-out, I just think these things happen in football. You're playing against other teams with their own motivations and with their own, pressures and expectations and stuff like that. Occasionally, you're not going to win every single football match. I think losing away at Tottenham, yes, it was really disappointing the way that it came about in the second half and the goals that we conceded. Losing away at Liverpool when they looked like a completely rejuvenated beast of a football club, in a game where I actually thought up until the last 10 minutes we were capable of getting a draw and arguably deserved a draw. I don't think so. Those are your 2 Premier League games. I think the Bruges one, it probably just has to be put away as a ridiculous anomaly, really. And that's not to put it all on Tyrone Mings, because there were teammates there who should have got him out of trouble by really upping the ante and getting something out of that football match. But so there's those 3 games.
Again, you've lost an away game in the Champions League. Like, that's hardly, losing to a League 2 side at home in the FA Cup in a competition you don't take seriously. You can lose away in the Champions League. Like, it can happen to basically anybody.
Yeah, and then there's those 3, and there's the Palace game. Palace game is the one that frustrated me more than ever, and we've had this debate. We can have this debate all night long, but so that one, I think we were guilty of underestimating the competition and not giving it the due respect and that kind of thing. But other than that, I think there's mitigation. I'm not saying that I'd rather have mitigation on the table than points and victories, but I think we've just got to see how we emerge from the other end of this. I'd almost say that, let's say we're kicking off the season. Let's say we're kicking off the Premier League season again when we resume, and let's almost take the temperature of where we are in terms of our progression or otherwise, and where we are as a fan base. Let's do that when we get to the end of the Christmas fixtures and see how we're heading into the new year.
You're absolutely right. It's too early to say, and that does feel like a cop-out answer at this stage of the season, but it's the same kind of thing I always say about, like, you may put overrunning results together in terms of results that, it's all doom and gloom, but what if you win the next 4 in a row? I'm not saying that's absolutely going to happen, but it's not impossible without even checking the fixtures. Things can happen very quickly, and all of a sudden you rise up the table and it's different. When there's people questioning individual players, and I'm guilty of this as well, a lot of questions over Leon Bailey this season. What if he scores a hat-trick against Palace and then goes on a little run and all of a sudden he looks great? Fantastic, great for Villa. And the same kind of applies to a transfer window. 11 games into a new season is not the time to judge whether 50 million was worthwhile on Onana. 3 years' time is probably when you can truly judge something like that. Has he been good during that period? Is he now worth nothing? Is he now worth 100 million? I know that's only the one player we're talking about because that was the one that was named in the question. But the common question or the common query or thought seems to be at the moment about Ian Matson. Why did we sign Ian Matson for when we clearly need a right back? We already had 2 left backs in Dean and Moreno. Why did we spend all that money? And a lot of it comes back to the PSR stuff that we talk about. Villa had to do certain deals. Do you think Chelsea are buying Kellerman for 20 million if we're not buying Matson for 35? That deal just doesn't exist, and Villa are in trouble and maybe have a points deduction. So it wasn't that they go, and Matson's a great player, by the way. I think that's a fantastic signing, as we've spoken about before, and he will go on to be good for us and has been good for us. But like the argument of well, why did we spend that money when we clearly needed a right back? Well, Villa knew they needed both. They wanted both. They spotted Matson as an opportunity, and he's an upgrade on Dean long term, and he's an upgrade on Moreno. Moreno goes out to Forest, didn't do very well last year. That's done. Compartmentalise it. That had to happen as it did. And they wanted to get a right back done, but it fell on Diego Carlos leaving, and he didn't. What are they supposed to do in that position? You can't just force a player out for no reason. So Villa know where they're weak. They know where they've got deficiencies. No fan is looking at it and going, well, have they thought about that at right back? Of course they have, but they just weren't able to get what they wanted to do done. And I hate the kind of single-mindedness of like, well, why did we spend 50 million on Onana when we needed something else instead? It just doesn't work like that. It's not that simple.
I think it's a really interesting time at the moment because we've been so spoilt by the trajectory that we've been on that, it's mad really that even people like me, kind of cynical pessimists who have been battered down by Villa in the past, thinking, well, actually, this journey is going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. But I think there's a difference, Dan, between wanting a player out of the team and wanting a player out of the club. And I think we have to be bigger picture enough to think, well, if somebody's had a poor performance, that's fine. It might mean that they're not in form or their complacency set in or they're not fully fit or they're not mentally right. So it might be the right thing to bring them out of the team to give somebody else an opportunity. But that doesn't suddenly mean they're not good enough for Aston Villa. We need an upgrade, because that's not the way that football clubs should run. And, and I suppose it is the manager and the coaching staff and the football department's prerogative to take the bigger picture. We're fans. We've paid our X amount of pounds for that game and we've come away from that game disappointed. We demand answers and we demand responses straight away. But it doesn't work like that. And I think it's dangerous to write off any of this group, really.
I also think it's dangerous to be judging players or their success rate purely based on transfer fees and whether they were a good deal at the time or was it worth spending X amount on a certain individual. When if we go through some of Villa's better players this season, of Yuri Tielemans on a free, Ross Barkley has been very good for basically a pittance in Premier League transfer terms. Morgan Rogers cost peanuts for a player of his ability as well. So to just go, well, it's not working at the moment, Villa need to go and spend another 100 million. Again, things don't particularly work like that, and I don't think that's required either. I feel like unless we're reading the room wrong and we're reading the fan base wrong, the stuff that's fed into us in terms of our comments and our tweets asking for questions, etc., I get the sense that this is the mood of the camp at the moment that we have to talk about. I feel like if you take away being able to check up on the league table and the Champions League, and let's say I get the Men in Black thing and I say, right, erase your memory. You haven't seen anything. You can't go and check anything. If you just listen to us talking and how we're assessing it, I don't think you'd think we're talking about a club that is in the position where Villa is. I think you'd be thinking this is a fan base that are talking about uncertainty around a manager, uncertainty around some of the squad they've got. Maybe they've only won a couple of games this season. And it's kind of like we're being really like forensical and like digging deep into Villa's deficiencies. And I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I feel like unless we're doing it wrong, I feel like everyone is kind of like, what about this? What about this? And I don't think it's that deep. I don't think this massive surgery required to make Villa work again. I think it's only little tweaks that we need.
I get that, but I think, like I say, I think when expectations levels rise, previous incarnations of Villa in the Premier League, either Lambert, McLeish, Dino, when we first came up, it would have been, well, 4 defeats is okay. 7 defeats is a crisis. Do you know what I mean? But I think the more that your levels of expectation rise,
yeah, I get that.
And maybe it's that I don't know, that Brummy thing or that thing that I've kind of painted myself with before, natural born pessimist. Maybe people are seeing like that. Oh no, we knew this was too good to be true. It's come crashing down. But maybe that's, I don't know whether I'm labouring this point, but maybe that's the big club mentality that even during the setbacks, you've got to think, well, there's things that got us here. We're here for a reason. So, like you just said, it doesn't necessarily need massive surgery. It just needs a slight reset to get us back on track. I think the danger now, Dan, and this is something I've banged on about in the past, is this, what do I call it, this microwavable mentality where, you know, you put it in and you want it ready straight away and it's got to be just so and perfect. And I think, I mean, we might get battered in the comments for this, for not digging out player X enough or not heaping enough criticism on Emery or whatever it might be. But that's not never really been our style. We've never really been the knee-jerk, you know, you've seen the channels. You've seen the channels that flip and flop and, you know, it's the end of the world, we're the best in the world and all that kind of thing. I think we're a really, really well set up club across our football department, our coach, our squad, hopefully the academy as well. And I think that we're in a good place. We're in a really strong place. And I think we are, and this will probably come back to haunt me if our poor form continues. If we are starting the season, in my mind, in 2 weeks' time, I think we're in much better shape than a lot of the teams in that cluster around us to actually think, well, okay, we're going to attack this next stage of the season and we're going to achieve things. We've never had the dual pressures of Premier League and Champions League before. We've seen what it's done to clubs previously. We saw what it did to Newcastle. You've got to probably give the people involved a little bit of leeway to actually tweak and to find out how that works. I think we'll finish in Europe. I think even before this mini blip, I think it was going to be a massive ask to finish in the top 4. I probably will be disappointed if we finish outside of Europa League places, to be honest, if we finish any lower than that. But there's a lot of football to be played before we even need to stress about that, really.
Yeah, come back to the Q&A in April when we're saying, is qualifying for the Europa League good enough for Aston Villa's expectations? And when everything's changed. But like I say, it's a long way away. Let's just do another very quick PSR one from Dave. John has alluded to in the past, due to PSR, obviously we've got to sell players to buy and all these kind of different things. Do you think we will sell a player in January to enable us to bring a right back in? And that is, again, flavour of the month. We need a right back. That is an area of the pitch that we are struggling in. Konsa playing right back is not the solution long term. He's our best, or one of our best centre backs, has to play there. And we'll talk about Konsa more in a second. But I don't know whether I see Villa doing any kind of serious business in January, to be perfectly honest. And that's not kind of inside scoop or Dan knows anything. I don't. It just, my gut feeling is, who are we going to sell to make the wiggle room necessary to buy the player of the quality that we need in January? That feels like a summer task to me.
I think it depends pretty much entirely on which phone numbers Monchi gets calls from in the next couple of months. I think it really does depend on what opportunities present themselves, basically. So
who do you sell? That is the first point. Who do you sell that you can say, okay, they're expendable to be able to manoeuvre something?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Because I don't know. I don't think there are any or many players who are surplus to requirements in that squad. Certainly nobody. If you're a buying club and you want to come in for one of Aston Villa's players because you think it's going to change your season in January, I'm not sure you could come in for. I'm not sure there's a player in that squad who would change your season if you're the buying club that Villa would be willing to get rid of. Yeah. So it might come back to the names that have been floating around before. You know, now Tyrone Mings is fit. Is Diego Carlos? I know he's an opposite side centre back, but is Diego Carlos available then? And so it may be that something like that presents itself, but it will probably need something like that to present itself before we can then say, well, actually, that frees up this amount of money on the wage bill. That gives us this amount of money for transfer fees. We can go and reinvest it here. I think if Villa thought that they got enough to get by when they kicked off the season in August, that I don't think they'll move too far away from that view, because the financial wheel and dealing had to be so balanced, if you like, in terms of the money that they're bringing in and where they're bringing it in from, that unless somebody comes in with a silly offer for somebody in a position where we've got 2 or 3 better options already in our squad, I don't think there'll be much done at all.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. We'll move on from that because we were inevitably asked about January as we get nearer to it. Moving on from PSR entirely to JSR next, who says, and that's not a thing, by the way, if you're wondering, what's that weird acronym? It's the person asking the question. JSR says, do you guys genuinely rate any of our wingers?
If you're throwing me with JSR, then I was thinking, is that like a Japanese pop band or something like that? Do I rate any of our wingers? I mean, I think the bigger question is, have we got many wingers?
I was going to say, what do you class as wingers? Would be my first counter question. Comment on our post-match for Liverpool. Obviously, the live comments are one thing. And we spoke about this on the show, me and Matt. I thought about it afterwards, like, emotions are heightened. We say that for the show ourselves. You know, sometimes we get carried away, whatever, and that's absolutely fair. And I thought, well, it's Saturday night. Maybe people have had a drink this afternoon or whatever. Like, maybe people are like, because it was like over the top stuff for me. It was, you know, Emery out, that kind of stuff, which I thought was bizarre. But the comments after on the recording of the episode, I thought, well, this is a Sunday now. Like, people have probably calmed down a bit, or they're not drunk anymore. And one of them specifically was about Leon Bailey, and there's a lot of stuff like Watkins is overrated, Rodgers isn't as good as we thought he was going to be, all this kind of stuff. And the opinion's fine. But one of the comments was, how is Leon Bailey a professional footballer? And it's kind of like, he's not playing well at the moment. We've spoken about it all season. Was last season a fluke? Like, have we all forgotten that he was like really good last year and scored lots of goals and was really important to Villa getting fourth? Like, this is the mentality that we speak about. To flip that now to, well, he's playing poorly, he's not even professional footballer standard. It's just, I can't, like, when people ask things like, do you rate them? I feel like people want us to be like that. They want to hear their opinion validated, and for us to go, oh yeah, he's absolutely shit. I can't stand him. Get him out. I never want him to see wearing that shirt again. He's just in a bad moment. Like, he's probably got an injury. He's low on confidence. He may go on, as I said, to score 10 goals this season in the second half, and he's really important and fires us to the Europa League. And we go, oh, fair play, Leon Bailey, you turned it around. I just can't judge him long term. Like, he should never kick a ball for us again after 11 games in the Premier League. It's to me, it's really baffling.
I think it's more, and this sounds patronising, I think it's more a judgment on how people choose to express themselves than it is about, you know, I'm not claiming to be more articulate than anybody, but I think it's, people go to extremes. You only have to look anywhere on social media to know that people go to extremes. So somebody has probably thought, I've had enough of it. That's too many times that Bailey's wandered down a cul-de-sac, that he's, you know, chose the wrong option, that he's lost the ball in a key area, whatever it might be. And they've thought, I'm going to express that. I've had enough of it. I've completely had enough of it. And that's people's prerogative to say that. I'm very much of the, I don't know if you've the challenges that Leon Bailey must have overcome to get to that place, to play football for a living at any standard, let alone, you know, Bundesliga and Premier League, probably means he's pretty good. He's a pretty good footballer, technically, tactically, physically. Mentality probably more than anything, because there's going to be so many times where that little bit of that desire to win and to be the best, whether that means that you practice more or whatever it might be. So any footballer to get to that level is, beyond the wildest dreams of what most of us kind of cloggers, probably speaking very much myself there, can dream of. That doesn't mean that there's times where he does things. I mean, there's been so many times in the last 2 or 3 matches where I've thought, what has happened to him? Has he been kidnapped? What has happened to the original Leon Bailey? Because we would have, a lot of last season, and there's so many ways that Villa could find ways to hurt teams. But because of Villa's methodical football, keep the ball, exert pressure, sometimes even last season when we're going on to win games, you're thinking, well, who's going to change this up? Who's going to vary this up? Give it Leon Bailey. He's the one who's going to actually vary the pace of the game by a quick burst or by a quick change of direction. We've seen so many cutback goals from Villa. We're talking about Villa being vulnerable in wide areas defensively at times. But so many of Villa's goals have been when they've been able to get that space down the flanks with an overlap. And Bailey's been very, really responsible for that in the past for down the right flank. So I think he's in a bad run of form. And this, again, comes back to the question, not necessarily the quality of wingers. Bailey's not been in form. Philogene is our other wide option, who's still a rookie, really. Listen, I know he's in his early 20s, and I know he's played season in the Championship, but in Premier League terms and in Champions League terms, he's very much a rookie. So you've got that option. Or you're playing a wide midfielder in there, and you are playing a Jacob Ramsey or a John McGinn on the flanks, and it's not going to. That's not their game, to do a step over and to maybe Ramsey more to carry the ball. But so I think at the moment, the problem that we've got, and I've said this before, is we've got Bailey, who's out of form and low on confidence. You've got Philogene, who's learning his way in the game. Are they enough of a challenge for each other to keep the standards really high? And we've said before, Diaby, he was that presence. He was that breathing down the neck of Bailey type presence, which seemed to get an extra level out of Bailey. So I think that's my concern at the moment, that there's not enough pressure on their positions. But in a long-winded answer to the question, I rate them because I think they're both really talented. It's just the challenge of the manager and the players themselves to get back on the level that we expect.
Okay, let's move on. Next question. Is it true or false? We don't get a true or false question very often on the Q&A. This is a little bit of a novelty. If Villa want to continue to compete at their new level, Konsa absolutely has to stop playing at right back and must start at his better position of centre back. It's about time we admit Carlos isn't good enough and Mings won't be the player he used to be. True or false?
Or I'm very much for players playing in their correct positions, if possible. And I think if we're playing,
but is it possible?
Well, if we're playing a standard 4 at the back, then your best centre halves, you would probably think, are Pau Torres on the left and Ezri Konsa on the right. Now, we've said before in this episode that we think we've still got strong options with Luca Dean and Ian Matson left back, so that's not so much of an issue. That's where it becomes a real challenge, isn't it? Because is Konsa your best right back at the club, potentially?
That's the problem at the moment. He's the best right back. And I'm not saying he's a brilliant right back, because he's not. He's a better centre back, but he's our best right back at the moment, and he's our best centre back, or best right sided centre back, if you like. You can't play in both positions, obviously. If you're we've definitely spoken about it before. I don't know if it was us, but we spoke about the lesser of two evils. What's worse, Thiago Carlos at centre back with Ezri Konsa right back, or Ezri Konsa in the middle and Cash right back, who's not reliable enough from a fitness perspective, or maybe a quality perspective, if that's the argument you want to go down, or a rookie in Costa Nedeljkovic or Bogard. What's worse, a rookie right back but a better centre half, or a flaky centre half and a right back who's not a right back? I don't know what's worse, to be honest.
But is this like you say, cause and effect again? Is this why Emery's felt that he's persevered with Bailey more? Because if he knows he's got Konsa at right back, he's got to have some. He can't put a right midfielder down that flank because he needs that attacking, prowess or whatever. And has that caused that issue? I mean, I don't know. It'd be interesting how Emery responds to this, because I was chatting to my mate the other night while we were watching the Liverpool game, and it was like, well, I thought that Emery would have gone 3 at the back by now, and used whichever one it was, but you'd have Torres, you'd have Konsa, and then you'd have one of Carlos or Mings to make you 3, and do it like that, and then almost kind of your fullback. You'd still have your wing backs, obviously offering that extra layer of protection, but you'd have your 3 that could shift across depending on which area, which flank the action came down. So maybe that's the answer. What's the best? Well, to have Konsa on the right side of a 3, so he's effectively doing both of those roles anyway. But again, maybe that points to the previous question. Maybe it was I've changed my mind already. Maybe it was a very bad transfer window, because if that one position was impacted so many other things, maybe we should have worked a bit harder to get a right back. I don't know, but
I don't think it was that. I think that helps add to the narrative that Villa didn't try. I think they did do everything they could. Fulham or whoever backing out of going for Diego Carlos has blundered that position, because Villa did want to do it. I would be amazed if Villa didn't sign a right back in the summer, because it's clear that we need one.
The defenders at our disposal last year, with the exception of Tyrone Mings, without Tyrone Mings, that defence was able to play a part in a team that got us 4th in the Champions League. So we've not weakened in that sense. The only issue that we've got is Cash's fitness. So I think that probably, we've spoken in the past, is Cash good enough? Do we need an upgrade? Whatever. I think still having a Cash who was fit and available every week, rather than one who's had to be dipped in and out of the team because of various setbacks, I think that would still put us in a stronger place. But because we've got, like you said, is it a quality issue? Potentially, but quality and a fitness issue, that means that Ezri Konsa's almost been designated for that area. But I'd be interested to see if Cash can get can stay fit for a couple of months and play his way back into form. It might not be perfect, but it might be more perfect than what we've got at the moment.
Ian says, should we go back to throwing 6 at the back? Just been talking about 5 at the back. 6 at the back, like we did at times when Emery first came in. The not keeping clean sheets is now a concern, even more so when the attacking lads are suffering with confidence. I think that last part is key there, isn't it? If you're still scoring goals, we can get away with it. And this is what we spoke about at the start of the season when we were asked, is the lack of clean sheets a problem? No, it doesn't matter, because if we're scoring 3, it doesn't matter that we concede 2. Now that we are struggling to score as many goals as well, it is a problem, because if you can't keep a clean sheet, you're going to make it very, very difficult for yourself to get anything in the Premier League. Never mind, if you're not scoring, you're not going to win, are you? So yes, it is a concern. Whether we throw 6 at the back, I get what the question is saying. I don't know. Kamar coming back, as we've said before, and starting into that midfield and playing as well as we know he can do or used to do, will make a massive difference to the right back discussion we've just had as well, because he'll drop back and help as well and do his bit. At the moment, we've not been able to see what worked well last season again. Obviously, we lost Douglas Luiz, and he was a part of making us tick as well. But the more defensive side of our structure, with Kamara dropping back in, we've not been able to see that yet. So what worked last year in terms of beating Man City at home and Arsenal, with Diego Carlos putting in man of the match performances and having help from Kamara, that side has not been allowed to play together yet. I would like to judge Villa when they can go back to what worked last season, and that's just not been the case so far.
I think the Kamara one's the really interesting one, because you've almost got an extra fullback, haven't you? Whichever side, it depends, So if it's Cash, let's say Cash is playing, if it's Cash bombing down the right, you've got Kamara who can fill in there and cover that area, and then likewise can do the same if you're attacking down the other end. So I think you're right. I think it'd be interesting to see. I think he will get in the team regularly, Kamara, when he's fit. Yeah. I think Emery will recognise the need for that. Now, again, that gives you the challenge. Well, what does Tielemans play a little bit further forward? Can you still fit the midfield that's got Tielemans, McGinn, and Rodgers potentially in there? Or does one of those have to be sacrificed and that kind of thing? I mean, Rodgers, I know I'm wandering off topic here. I mean, I think Rodgers is an interesting one for me. I think somebody said earlier in the comments, Rodgers is not as good as we thought it was going to be. Nobody had any real expectations of what Rodgers was going to be. And whatever they were, he's exceeded them by far. But I did wonder, and again, this is bloke watching in the pub with my limited tactical knowledge, I did wonder whether the way it was playing out on Saturday evening, whether as McGinn comes on, as Ramsey goes off, it was McGinn for Ramsey, wasn't it? Yeah. Could that have been McGinn, who's almost comes in centrally and he's kind of possibly helping to press a little bit more from the middle of the park, and then Rodgers can give you something on the flank. Now, I think Rodgers as a 10, as a 10 who starts deep and runs with the ball, I think that's brilliant. But that's not always. He's not always going to have that ability or that option to do it. So, could he be? Is he your wing option? Potentially, because you've got Buendia who can play as a 10, you've got McGinn who can play as a 10, you've got Tielemans who can potentially play as a 10 as well. That's not me knocking Morgan Rodgers, because when we get that right and he gets that ball down the centre of the pitch on the half turn, I think he's dynamite, to be honest. But with the challenges that we've got, are these potential solutions that you can look at? I don't know. I know that doesn't really answer about 6 at the back, but that's where my mind went to.
Ricardo asked 2 questions. One was about Rodgers, and we've kind of touched on that throughout, I think. So I'm going to skip over to his second, which is football generic, which I feel like is a decent place to end rather than just being purely Villa related. I like stuff like this. They say, how annoying is it during live games on TV when replays or people in the stands are being shown when the game is live, like the ball is live, it's balls in play? I noticed this throughout Liverpool. See it in games all the time. Probably more so when it's your team. I don't know if I'm that bothered when I'm a neutral, because it's like, oh, there's, I don't know, Roger Federer at Old Trafford. Oh, that's cool. Why that is the first name that came to me, I have no idea. When it's our game and it's like showing, I don't know, Arne Slot sat there rubbing his bald head for like what feels like an eternity. It's like, I know the game's kicked off. Like, can we go back to seeing it, please?
First of all, Roger Federer. Villa's new training kit always reminds me of Roger Federer rocking up at just rocking up at Wimbledon in the immaculate whites. You know, the tracksuits that they wear before the game.
Yeah.
I just think that must be a nightmare to wash. Arne Slot rubbing his bald head. I'm all for baldies on mainstream telly. Yeah, I don't understand. There'll be enough times when the game's dead. When the ball's dead in terms of long injury delays or whatever, or VAR delays. There's enough chances to have a cutaway. Once you produce and know that person is sitting there, they've got a bank of about 400 cameras, so that person's still going to be sitting there. So
it's the ones where they just go on too long. Like for a goal kick, it might take 10 seconds for a restart. So a 5-second cutaway to the substitute running up and down. Oh, there's John Duran. Can he be the difference maker today? Yeah. I get it, fine. When you hear the ball's been kicked and it's like still lingering on, I don't know, an away end, or like I said, just the subs bench or something totally redundant. I'm getting nothing from seeing it, and I can hear the sound of a ball being kicked off a boot several times. It's like, no, what's going on? Like, I need to see what's going on.
Post-match, they'd got about 20 minutes of analysis of the game, but they never really got stuck into the first half penalty shout or the second half penalty shout and really interrogated that. And the thing that annoys me is I actually find the analysis is better if your pundits are sat in the studio rather than on the side of the pitch. I just don't think.
Nice observation.
I don't think they can get stuck into, because they're all watching it on an iPad or whatever. I like the post-match interviews when the manager rocks up and it's a little bit more laid back and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's more conducive to a better interview. Post-match on Saturday, if you've got McManaman and Hutton and they're just talking about, Liverpool's title ambitions and all that kind of stuff. All of that to me is, it's words and it's speculation. But if you've actually got some of even if it's just like a highlight package of how well their right back played when he came on, and at least you're learning something. rather than whether you think Steve McManaman thinks that Liverpool have got the staying power. So I don't really like that dynamic. I'd rather, if you want to do a little bit of chat pitch side, fine. Get yourself in the studio after that, in the warm, and let's learn something. Let's show us some of those pictures with some insight on top of that.
Yeah, nice observation. Never thought about that before. Silly question time, very quickly, from Javo, who says, could Matt bench press John and vice versa? Obviously, John's not here to give the vice versa, but could you bench press John?
I probably could. I'd probably put myself out of action for the next 6 months. I'd do my back in, but I reckon is that above my head though, or is that just?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I could. I could if I make his food budget when he goes on Europeans. If I tighten that up even more, so that you can only have tap water rather than just a plain baguette, I could probably do it, but I'd probably get sacked for that.
Do you reckon he'd do it the other way around? He's a strong lad, like he's in the gym and stuff, but you're obviously a much bigger gentleman than he is.
I think I'd get too tickly. It depends where you pick me up, boy. Because I think I'd just get a bit.
Quick shout out time. Go on then. What you got?
I was watching my daughter play football over at Wolverley the other day, and one of her teammates' granddads wandered over. I think I've given him a shout out before, but he said, "Matt, I'm just on the phone to my son who lives in Mid Wales. He asked if you were here. Big fan of the show. Can you give him a shout out?" So his name is Jordan Rice. His dad's Tony, and Maisie is the teammate of my daughter. So big shout out to Jordan, Tony, and Maisie.
Matt, thank you for joining me for this international break Q&A. We said at the start that there wasn't that many questions this week, but a lot of really kind of in-depth discussion from those questions. So there may not have been loads to pick from, but they were good questions, clearly, because we've just about reached the hour mark. Although by the time I edit this down a bit from some of our silly nonsense, it won't be an hour. But a much longer episode than I anticipated. International break is one of those things, isn't it? Everyone I feel like we need a break. So if you have tuned into this podcast, thank you very much. We will be back later in the week with an episode with Colin Abbott, who's talking about his new book, the 150 years worth of history of Aston Villa. What a terrible sell for this book. Tune into the podcast later in the week for a better sell than that. Matt Kendrick will have another voice notes as well. Matt Kendrick, thank you for sorting that at some point. And then next week is the return of the Villa Social as well. So a little bit of a quieter international break for us, but still some content if you need your Villa fix. Right, thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Claret podcast, and we'll see you later in the week.